Let's get to Tim Verghese, see how much joy he's got
Nah,
this morning
nah,
from inside
nah,
Nebraska.
nah.
Tim, what do we got going on, bud?
Hey, not too much. How y'all doing?
Oh, just trying to make it. TV, just trying to make it. Our level of surprise, because we're gonna get to your Timbits and recruiting nuggets. How quickly the conversation kicked up over one Marty Sharmar Brown being like that thing went like 0 to 60.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm. It's still something like I'm tracking and trying to figure out, just how real things are at this point. Feels like there's obviously some legit interest on both sides, but still kind of monitoring that situation. I'm not necessarily surprised. I did think the staff through spring talked about the confidence in the room, but then you saw some of the names hopping in the portal. Uh, so far, it's at the running back position specifically. I feel like if you're Nebraska, you have no choice but to explore some of the options. Shamar Brown, for one. I thought Branson Robinson at Georgia is another intriguing option. Benjamin Hall at Michigan. And there's just a couple of those like big body backs that make sense for what Nebraska needs in the room right now, and something they just don't like really have in the offense right now.
I think that's critical. You're right, because when Quentin Ives is your biggest back, you probably need a little you need a big body. You need a big body.
Right.
And I
Right.
and I,
And more than a big body, you need someone that can run. Like my thing with Ives is I think he can be a power back. I think he can be a good back. I think he runs a little high still. And when you for a short yardage back, you need someone that can get low.
Mm.
like the Yin Yang twins.
Little
No to the
John, little
wall.
John Eastside voice.
Yeah.
Um, that's probably a little before your
Get
time,
low,
Tim.
get
Um,
low, get low, get low, get low.
Tim, as you're looking at places other than the running back spot, I know Coach Rule said, "Hey, we're not necessarily looking for anyone specifically in the portal, but if there's a guy we think can be a difference maker, we're obviously going to do our due diligence." Are there, in your mind, some difference makers out there that either Nebraska sniffing around or that are sniffing around Nebraska that you think might be like plausible options?
I mean, at this point, it's been slow. I mean, one that Nebraska's been sniffing around a little bit has been edge rushers. There's a couple intriguing ones. Georgia's about to pull one from Army. Nebraska sniffed around a little bit there. There's another one from Buffalo that's in the portal. Georgia State has one in the portal. So there's just a couple like edge rushers in the portal right now that Nebraska's at least kind of sniffed around and done their due diligence on. Will they offer? Will they end up getting these guys on campus? I don't know. I do think the confidence in the edge rusher room is real. But if you can find a difference maker, and again, if George is out here plucking Army edge rushers, I feel like any program should at least be sniffing around those type of guys.
Tim, how do you feel about I'm on this and I can take it over time if I'm wrong or I'm being a little naive. But I just feel like, I listened to Kirby Smart last week, and he was talking about how the standard has kind of gotten away and they can't practice like Georgia. And, he asked the guys that had been through 3 spring practices to raise their hand and how few guys could raise their hand. We saw Heupel take a stance and Tennessee take a stance on Nico in that situation. Um, we see how Coach Rule is trying to run his program. At some point, do you think that when I say water will find its levels and the chaos will die down, do you subscribe to that, or will it take one of these guys? And hear my heart. I'm not putting what George is doing and Smart in the same good old heart of the Middle America Coach Rule. But will it take a Coach Rule style of winning, or maybe Iowa to get a signature national relevance win, or a program like that for folks to figure out there's multiple ways to do this without giving in?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't even think it takes that much. I think like Notre Dame doing what they did last year was eye opening to some programs, and I think you look ahead to how some of these other programs are building and some of the programs on the rise. I think the way Florida has generally handled things, good and bad, has been a bit of a lesson. On the flip side, the way Florida State's handled things, good and bad, Miami's handled things, has been a lesson. So I think schools are learning. I think more than anything, I mean, what's needed to kind of level all this out is legislation, and we're getting close. I think this house settlement. I'm of the belief that this house settlement's going to smooth certain things over. And yeah, there's going to be outliers like there currently are. Like there are going to be a couple quarterbacks every year that are breaking the market and getting additional, whatever. Or there's going to be like, hey, a top edge rusher hops in the portal and demands something pretty crazy. But those are going to be outliers more so than they already are. And it's going to be, just in my personal opinion, I think that's going to smooth some things over. And I also think schools and coaches, like again, this Nico thing is one where schools are going to start putting their foot down a little bit. I mean, programs and advisors are going to learn like, hey, there's a line, you can't cross it, and it's not a free for all anymore.
Tim, I'm curious because you brought up several programs there, and I think sometimes when we talk about transfers, we look at a number and be like, "Oh, this is a transfer-heavy program because they brought in 20 guys," or "This is a high school recruiting-heavy program because they only brought in 8 guys," or whatever the case is. But if I remember the statistics from last year, Notre Dame had almost as many, if not as many, transfer guys as Ohio State did, but we viewed them very differently. We saw Florida State go from 13-0 one year with heavy transfers to 2-10 the next year with heavy transfers. Like philosophically, when you're looking at these programs and how they attack the transfer portal, like how would you describe the differences between like a Florida State versus a Notre Dame or a Nebraska?
Yeah, so Florida State, Norvell, like he was one of the first ones to really attack the portal and say, "Hey, I've got a good roster. Let me go and get aggressive and add to this roster." That's where he went and got Jared Verse and he got Braden Fiskey and he got these kind of guys and elevated that team to what they were able to accomplish, 2 years ago. He tried the same thing a year later without the high school recruiting to match, which is what all of these other programs had to fill out the back end of the roster and to develop internally. So there was no high school really recruiting, and then he went out into the portal and swung and missed. And that's what you can't do. Like what you have to do is there has to be a balance, like what Nebraska's done over the last few years. Is you build out the bread and the depth of your class, the heart of your program is high school recruiting, and you complement that with transfer portal. Notre Dame did the same thing. And of course, it's a little different when you go out and say, hey, we're going to go get our quarterback out of the transfer portal. But when you're a program like Notre Dame, when practically everything else has, for the most part, been developed internally, and even most of those other transfers they had are multi-year guys that they developed themselves. When you're able to do that and then you're able to throw in a quarterback, that's another strategy in building a program. We've seen multiple programs have success doing that where they build everything else up and then they go out and they go find a veteran quarterback or an established quarterback that can help take that roster over the top. I think there's a balance there in ultimately the lesson is high school recruiting still matters. You still have to be able to develop as a program. And so far, Florida State, they just lost the lone 5-star high school recruit they got yesterday through the transfer portal. The guy didn't do a whole lot in Florida State. He's going to go do something else somewhere else. That's the lesson is ultimately you have to be able to develop. You have to be able to recruit high school at a successful level, get these guys into the program, get them to stick around in the program. And then, yeah, at some point you have to be able to complement the roster with transfers, but the guys you bring in have to fit the culture and you have to hit. You have to hit on more than 50% of those guys.
So let me ask you something, TV. At some point, do you think with the revenue, because I haven't heard anybody talk about this, and I'm curious, with revenue sharing and the numbers, is it maybe an unintended positive is it will reemphasize the importance of quality recruiting at the high school level because a lot of times those won't be your big spenders, right? They will be guys that will still have yet to prove themselves because I think coaches will be looking for a way to tier the money, right? And I think high schoolers will be at the bottom of the rung, just from an economic standpoint. Could an unintended consequence be that the level of importance of recruiting the bulk of your guys out of the high school ranks will happen again, as it seems to have kind of gotten away from us the last year or two?
I think it's possible. It ultimately depends on, I think, contract language too. Like if you're able to lock in guys for multi-year contracts, I think it's going to be like, hey, we can get this guy out of high school and lock him in for 3 years, or we could go to the portal and get this guy in a 1 year, but he could very much just hop in the portal after 1 year again. Like I think that's part of it. I think the opportunity to go in and get as many years out of these guys as possible is another part of it. So I think it would depend on contract language more than anything. But I think I personally believe once we get to revenue sharing, there is going to be like a, hey, you're locked in for 2 3 years type. And so yeah, if in that case, in that situation, if schools are able to do that, then yeah, I think that would reemphasize high school recruiting for a lot of these programs. I mean, we've already seen it from the Nico situation. I talked to some college personnel, like some college staffers that were like, hey, maybe if you're like not a top SEC or Big Ten program, maybe it's time to stop going after these top 5 star quarterbacks, paying them all this money. Go after the guys that you could develop and can be solid college quarterbacks. No guarantee those guys make the NFL and have NFL traits, but you're going to get a very solid college quarterback.
Well, and it kind of to that point, right? In addition to recruiting high school, I think one of the unintended consequences to the positive, it's going to emphasize guys that are really good talent evaluators, right? Because if you don't,
well, you want return, or you sharpen up your return of investment philosophy.
Right. But like if you're not a great talent evaluator right now, you can go into the portal if you've got the money. Like let's say you're
Florida State.
Florida State. Texas A&M, Florida State. Somebody who has a ton of money. Maybe you're not great talent evaluators. You can go out and just say, well, I can pay for Jared Burris, and I can pay for Keon Coleman, and I can pay for Jordan Travis or whoever, right? As opposed to if you're anybody else and you go, okay, I can't go out and just buy a roster, whether it works for them or not. I have to actually go and evaluate these guys that are 3 and 4 stars, maybe lower 4 stars, and say, hey, this is what I can see the projection of what you can become. Let's go get these guys because these are guys we can afford. And I think I'm a better talent evaluator than X, Y, and Z school.
Yeah, I think it's going to emphasize that. I think it's going to be important for these staffs to, or these head coaches in particular, to look over their staffs, look over their recruiting departments, and make sure they've got guys in there that know what they're looking for and can check boxes and can land those guys. Like I look at a couple of programs right now, like Penn State in the wide receiver position. Like why has that been an issue for them for so long? Like they seem to be working to address that through the portal now, but it's been an issue for a while. I see some of these programs and it's like there's specific positions they always struggle to identify. You mentioned Florida State. I think Miami's a program that kind of just throws money around a little bit and doesn't really evaluate fit or talent or really ultimate long-term development. I think they do a good job at the high school level, but through the portal, I haven't loved some of the work they've done.
Yeah, that's funny you bring them up. That's one of the things that I was talking about with Marty yesterday in Miami, where you just have to make sure. And I'm not trying to sway or deter. We're just talking, right? But I agree with you about how many these schools that don't spend wisely. At some point, it comes back to the people that are investing the money. Like rich people don't get rich by wasting money. So they'll want to see like, okay, we tried this the first year or two. We need to be better spenders, right? Tennessee will be better post Nico, right? Miami will be better post AJ Allen leaving again, right? I mean, guys at FIU now, that was one of your big gets 2 years ago. Like at some point, schools are just going to say, listen, we only have so much revenue. We just need to be better with it. And I think we just need to be patient.
Yeah. And I'm curious to see, like, for example, like Houston's a program right now that's spending a good bit.
SMU.
Yes, exactly. Like those 3 programs, like, are they going to learn the lesson a little late? Or like, I think Texas Tech, I think they've done a good job of, they're going to be big spenders in the portal, but they're also addressing team needs and they're finding guys that fit the culture and guys that are attainable. They're not going out and swinging necessarily on guys. They're kind of breaking the market on specific guys, but they're not going after, oh, okay, we're going to go beat out a bunch of SEC schools for this guy. It's like, no, we're going to go break the market for this guy because we think he's this level of talent and he can come in and contribute for us. But I like what Texas Tech has done, but it's a gamble for sure. Like adding as many transfers as they have, you still have to kind of balance that with the culture you've built in the locker room.
Let me ask you about another school I think that flies under the radar, even though we assume they're power brokers. How do you like Texas and kind of how they're doing it via the portal through the high school development? Sark's on a little bit of a roll. We like his roster. Um, I put them in a little bit different category than Penn State because Penn State's still been they've gotten much better through retaining their high school retention too, right? They get those one or two or three, four guys, and they don't miss on those big guys at Penn State. Like, how you feel about Texas?
On one hand, I don't think they've been as aggressive as they possibly could be in the portal. But on the other hand, like whenever I talk to people about programs and how they're run, Texas comes up time and again as like the example of how to compete right now. Like how you manage a locker room, how you manage, a bunch of guys that are making a bunch of money, how you manage egos and personality and make sure you're finding correct team fit. Like they are so competitive at practically every position that there's no room. Like you kind of have to like to adapt quick. Like just a spring alone. Talking to people down there, it was like a hey, they brought in a bunch of wide receivers, like young wide receivers. There's a couple of those guys that aren't going to stick around very long, whether it's for talent or personal reasons. They're just not going to be around in this room for very much long, or they're going to have to learn to adapt real quick and fit into that room because there's so much competitiveness and they brought in these guys. Like they brought in what, three or four receivers. I think Khalil Lockett's going to be the best of those guys. Jamie French was one that kind of came in, and there hasn't been he's not nearly the level of player they thought he was. And on the flip side of that, like they like the talent of Michael Terry, but Michael Terry came from a smaller school and had some, wasn't really around like the 7-on-7 scene and isn't really familiar with these guys. There's been a bit of a like adjustment for him culturally, and so it's like he's kind of got to get with the program, or things could get a little messy for him, or like he just might not be around there very much longer. So I've heard like just in general as far as handling the transfer portal, as far as handling NIL, as far as just like managing people. Texas gets praised time and time again for the work they've done. They basically run it. The way I've heard it said to me is they basically run it like an NFL program, essentially.
Tim, you brought up a name there that's really interesting, I think, for Nebraska, and that's Michael Terry. And it reminded me of a question I've gotten a lot this week about David Sanders as well. A couple of guys whose situations may have changed that Nebraska was in on pretty late. Have you thought at all about either of those guys and the potential that they might get a chance to bounce back at Nebraska?
I still think those are guys that weren't ready made too. So they kind of still fit the development model, in my opinion.
Even though they were highly
right. I still
guys.
felt well, let's ask you, Tim. Did you felt Sanders wasn't a year one starter, or did you?
I didn't think so, but then talking to people in Tennessee, he came in, put on the weight. Like they think he's going to start this fall. Like they think he's like the guy. Like they're pretty happy with him.
And we'll see.
Yeah, so we'll see, but they're pretty happy with him. I think Sanders is probably going to stay. Like I think if he was to hop back in the portal or to do something, or hop in the portal or do something, then I think Ohio State would be the program because they were the one that finished runners up this first time around. But on the Terry side of it, I think that that could legitimately be an option. Like that could be a guy we're talking about this time in December.
It's so hard though because I want to get to a couple of guys. Locally, not locally, but on Nebraska's radar, guys like Mosley is one of those wide receivers that Nebraska's in on, seems to have made some headway after the last visit. And then Luke Sorensen, who I think is a legitimate tight end prospect who was kind of blown away. When you look at receivers getting acclimated at Nebraska or to Nebraska based on what else is out there, what are they telling you that they like about this offense?
Dylan. I mean, just the quarterback getting the ball out quick. The fact that multiple guys tell me it's like, hey, it's really cool that Dylan has like a really strong relationship with his top pass catchers. Like Luke Sorensen told me I hung out with every one of the tight ends. They all told me that they've got a close relationship with Dylan, specifically the top end of that room has a really good relationship with Dylan. And then Dylan took him golfing. So Dylan was like, hey, let's go build a relationship ourselves, So I think that's a big part of it. I think the balance of the run sticks, the run and the pass sticks out. I've heard multiple O linemen be like, "Hey, it's like it's run heavy. It's very like it allows me to do stuff I want to do. Really maul on the interior." And then you hear receivers kind of talk about like, "Hey, they open it up though. They get 4 receivers out there sometimes. They get 3, 4 receivers out there sometimes." And it's the opportunity to kind of rotate and play. Like they see the depth Nebraska has. They see how much rotation there is at practice. The staff is able to go back and show them on film and show the snap counts and say, "Hey, we actually do this in game as well." And all that sticks out to guys. Like all of that is reflective. And then just, I mean, it's Dana Holgorsen. It's a Dana Holgorsen offense. It's Da'Keel Shorts, his track record of development. You're going to see Da'Keel Shorts here this next week touting Matthew Golden, wide receiver 1, Matthew Golden, first round pick, and that's something that's going to stick with recruits.
Mm. Tim, speaking of that wide receiver room, obviously with the departure of Hardly Gilmore, do you look at that room and think, hey, Nebraska is probably in a position where you'd like them to add another receiver?
If the guy is there at this point, maybe, but I think you need to. I think if it's someone in there, it's going to be someone that is a day one difference maker. I don't think they're going after developmental guys at this point. And yeah, I also think just that confidence in what they can land in 2026. I don't see it. I really don't see it at this point.
Let me ask you about the quarterback position, especially with Dayton in the fold, and we know what they feel about Trey Taylor, who, bless his heart, he's a Carmel Catholic guy, home of Ed Stewart, one of my buddies. It's a 2027 guy. I get it. I think A&M is still in the thick of it. I'm guessing Illinois is right there, LSU. Where did he gain the most traction, or where did Nebraska gain the most traction with Trey Taylor?
Culture was a big one for him. They checked boxes academically, but not a huge thing. Obviously, he's got other programs that check those boxes as well. But it was Rule, the relationship with Rule. I think as soon as like Nebraska, Rule offered him at midfield last fall, and then took a personal like hand in building that relationship. That was a big deal for him, like getting to know him. And then when he came back, he started building that relationship with Dana Holgorsen, and Nebraska made sure it's like, hey, you're building the relationships with the important guys. We're not sidestepping you. We're not just dismissing you to your area recruiter. But to his credit, EJ Bartel did a really good job getting Nebraska's foot in the door here, keeping Nebraska in this. But it was just the fact that he built these strong relationships with the head coach. They made it clear that he was the priority quarterback target, and they've just continued to make him feel at home. The offense clicks with him, the system clicks with him, and then the biggest one was the last 2 times he's been on campus. You spent a lot of time with Dylan, and Dylan's kind of just told him, "Hey, do something different. Like, don't go to the Georgias and the SEC schools. Like, go do something different. Try something else. Like, I took a chance on Nebraska. Like, why don't you do the same thing?"
Mm. Tim, I'm curious because we talk about these quarterbacks a lot in terms of their ratings and stars and stuff like that. But what about Trey Taylor's game specifically draws Nebraska to him?
It's a big frame that will develop, that they think will continue to develop and fill out. He's been doing this for a really long time. Like he's kind of been growing up playing the quarterback position's been looking to this. Like so mentally, he's further along than the typical high school quarterback. He can play in structure, does a really good job of kind of pushing the ball downfield. There's just a bunch of traits that they think they can continue to develop and build on. And that's just kind of the read I get on it, is just kind of it's one of those situations where they think he's a guy that still has some untapped potential, can still continue to develop. And I think there's something there too in terms of like just the ability to take the layups. We talk so much about Dylan and how what it takes to win is taking the layups. He does a really good job of that.
Let me ask you about, I'll get you out on this, with Devin Jackson and maybe kind of the tandem with Odom and how they feel about Nebraska as a pair. Are they connected, or is this kind of going to be two separate deals as Coach Addison Williams gets a chance to shine?
I think this is starting to become a duo recruitment. They've, especially the way they just handle things this spring. They've been playing 7-on-7 together. They're obviously high school teammates, but it's not like they're from the same area. Devin's from Florida, but Danny Odom's from Pennsylvania, moved in to go play at First Academy. So Devin, like, for a while, Penn State was a contender for him. I think Penn State's still a contender for him. That isn't for Devin. But outside of that one program, at this point, the programs at the top for both of those guys want both of those guys. And Nebraska was one of the first that kind of pushed the, let's take both of you. We want the package deal. Addison Williams has a really strong relationship with both. And I think they're well positioned.
He's a good dude.
Yeah.
He's a good man.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me, what sticks out, is the fact that Addison had established a relationship, kind of knowing UCF didn't have a chance, and then when he got to Nebraska, he was able to be like, "Hey, we're at a Big Ten school now, and we can come get you." And those guys were pretty receptive to it. They like him, and yeah, I'm very interested to see how this summer goes for the both of them, because they're bringing both those guys in on June 20th, which feels like the weekend. That's also the weekend that Dayton Raiola's in town. Luke Sorensen, Ryan Mosley, DeZephan Walker, like those are the top of the board targets at those positions.
Yeah.
That's our guy, Tim Verghese, Inside Nebraska. Great stuff as always, Tim. Appreciate the time. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, TV.
Sir, appreciate y'all.